You ever watch a show that just gets under your skin? Not because of a cheap jump scare, but because of an idea that feels a little too real. Well, today we're going to journey into the world that created one of the most iconic shows of all time, The Twilight Zone. And we're going to see why this sci-fi classic wasn't just about strange stories. It was actually a mirror held up to a very, very anxious America.
So, picture this. It's more than 60 years ago. A TV shelf flickers on and it opens up this doorway right in the middle of living rooms all across the country. But this wasn't just a door to another channel. It was a portal to a whole other dimension, a world filled with some of the strangest, most unsettling, and truly unforgettable stories ever told. And with those mysterious words, millions of people found themselves standing on the edge of a place they had never been, a place they would keep coming back to, week after week. They were about to enter the Twilight Zone. So from 1959 to 1964, the show's creator, this guy named Rod Serling, he gave television audiences something they had never seen before. I mean, it was this amazing mix of science fiction, fantasy, a little bit of psychological thriller, maybe a dash of horror, all mixed together into these perfect little half-hour dramas.
But here's the thing. Don't let the aliens and the monsters fool you. This show was about so much more than just getting a good scare. The Twilight Zone was like a powerful mirror, and it used all these fantastic stories to talk about the very real fears people were dealing with at the time.
To really understand this show, we've got to step back in time into the world that actually created it. And our journey starts with that picture-perfect image of the 1950s, a decade that's often remembered as this time of, perfect harmony.
The word people always use for this era is idyllic. It just makes you think of a really simple, happy, peaceful time in America. But you have to ask yourself, was life really that perfect?
I mean, this is the image that was being sold to everybody. You'd see posters and magazines just filled with these smiling families, backyard barbecues, perfect suburban homes with the little white picket fences. This was the American dream, all packaged up and presented for everyone to see.
And of course, television was the #1 cheerleader for this whole wholesome image. You had shows like Leave It to Beaver, which painted this world of happy families, where pretty much any problem could be solved with a little fatherly advice right before the credits rolled. It really pushed this idea of conformity, this idea that everybody should want the exact same perfect suburban life.
But that happy, perfect picture, it was really just a thin layer on the surface. Because underneath it all, there was this powerful feeling of anxiety just bubbling up, pulling at the very foundations of American society.
So while all the TV shows were showing these happy-go-lucky families, the news was telling a completely different and, frankly, much scarier story. This was the era of the Cold War, and the shadow of a nuclear war hung over, well, everything.
You see, the world's two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, they were locked in this really dangerous game of one-upmanship. It was called the arms race. Each country was just frantically building bigger and more destructive weapons, trying to outdo the other in this absolutely terrifying competition.
This cartoon from back then just captures the tension perfectly. You've got the leaders of the two most powerful countries in the world literally arm wrestling on top of bombs that could end civilization. I mean, it's no wonder that everybody felt like they were living on the edge of a knife.
And at the heart of this whole conflict were two totally different ideas about how the world should work. You had the Soviet Union's communism, where the government basically owns and controls everything, and then you had American capitalism, where private companies and individuals drive the economy. This massive disagreement was basically the fuel for the whole global fire. And this fear, it wasn't just something you read about in the newspaper. It really seeped into everyday life. All across America, school kids were being taught how to survive a nuclear attack. They practiced something that's now famous or infamous, duck and cover. It was this grim little ritual of hiding under their desks. But even as they were doing it, there was this sense of, absurdity. I mean, everyone, probably even the kids, had to be wondering the same thing, right? Could a little wooden school desk really protect you from the most powerful weapon ever created? The answer was pretty obvious and pretty chilling.
So here we are. We're in this world that's just torn between two completely different realities. This picture-perfect dream on one hand, and this terrifying nightmare on the other. And it's right in the middle of this contradiction that a writer named Rod Serling found his voice. Now, here's the problem if you're a storyteller like Serling. He wanted to write about all these big issues, the fear, the paranoia, the problems in society. But the TV networks back in the 1950s, they were terrified of controversy. They didn't want to touch any of it. So he had to get creative.
And as the 50s started to turn into the 60s, a new kind of feeling started creeping in: disillusionment. That perfect, happy image started to crack, and people started feeling this really sharp sense of disappointment when they realized the world wasn't the safe, simple place they'd been told it was.
So Serling's brilliant solution was to wrap up all of his commentary in the disguise of fantasy and science fiction. He could write a story that was really about neighborhood paranoia and how quickly people can turn on each other, like in the classic episode The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, but he'd tell it with aliens causing the trouble, not people. It was genius.
And that, right there, brings us full circle. It brings us back to the show itself, into that strange, unsettling place that Rod Serling invited audiences into every single week.
So, after all of that, what exactly is this Twilight Zone? What did Serling mean when he talked about that mysterious fifth dimension in the show's opening?
Well, believe it or not, the show itself tells us the answer, right there in its famous opening narration. It's like a little roadmap for anybody about to take a trip into the unknown.
And here's the beautiful, simple truth of it all. The Twilight Zone, it was never a place you could find on a map. It was a place in the mind. It's that hazy space between science and superstition, between what we know for sure and what we're afraid of. It was, as the show itself said, a dimension of imagination.
In the end, the Twilight Zone was a mirror held up to the anxieties of its own time. And that just leaves us with one last, kind of spooky question. If we held that same mirror up to our world today, what modern anxieties, what hidden fears would we see looking back at us from the shadows?